For 15 years, my life was a beautifully crafted lie. A lie built on the foundation of love and a prenuptial agreement I was told was just a formality. I thought I had it all: a loving husband, a beautiful home, a respected career. Then, one Tuesday, I won $12 million. I believed it was our fresh start, a chance to build the life we truly deserved. Instead, it became the reason my husband, Jake, and his family, who had always looked down on me, showed their true colors and threw me away. This is the story of how I used the very thing they thought would protect them to get my share back. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ava Miller. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. I'm an architect, 42 years old, and until 10 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. My job wasn't glamorous, designing municipal buildings and small-scale housing projects, but it paid the bills, bringing in a steady $75,000 a year. It was enough to keep my husband Jake and me comfortable in our modest 3-bedroom townhouse in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Houston. Jake, on the other hand, was all about glamour. He owned a high-end interior design firm, specializing in luxury home staging for the city's wealthiest clients. His family, the Caldwells, had old money, the kind that built entire subdivisions and owned half of the real estate downtown. Jake and I had been married for 15 years. He was handsome, charming, and ambitious. He was a perfect match for the vision I had of my life. The Caldwells, however, never thought I was good enough for their precious son. They made that crystal clear when they insisted I sign a prenuptial agreement before our wedding in December 2010. It's just to protect the family assets. Jake's father, Robert Caldwell, had explained in his lawyer's office downtown, his voice dripping with condescension. Nothing personal. Ava, just business. You understand. I signed it without a second thought, my heart full of love and blind trust. What was theirs stayed theirs. What was mine stayed mine. And anything we acquired together during the marriage would be considered marital property. It seemed straightforward and fair enough. For 15 years, our marriage was solid, at least on the surface. We weren't rich by Caldwell standards, but we were happy. I worked part-time at my small firm, spending the rest of my time as an uncredited project manager for Jake's business. My design sensibilities and architectural expertise were the backbone of his firm's success, turning his big ideas into beautiful, functional spaces. We often talked about our future, maybe buying a bigger house someday, having children. Everything felt normal, comfortable, and predictable. Then, on a Tuesday morning in October 2024, everything changed. I'd been playing the same set of lottery numbers for years, a combination of family birthdays and anniversaries from my side. Someday, I'd always joke to Jake, these numbers are going to make us millionaires. That Tuesday, they did. $12 million after federal taxes. Texas doesn't tax lottery winnings, so it came to about $8.1 million. I remember staring at the winning ticket in our kitchen that evening, barely believing it was real. Jake was screaming, jumping up and down, calling his parents on his cell phone. "We're rich! Ava!" he shouted, throwing his arms around me. "We're actually rich!" For about 10 minutes, I thought our dreams had finally come true. That same night, the entire Caldwell family showed up at our house. His parents, his younger brother, David, even his snobby aunt, Margaret, who usually pretended I didn't exist. They were celebrating, popping champagne, making plans. But something felt off. The way they looked at me had changed. It was subtle at first, sideways glances, conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Jake seemed different, too distant, cold. Over the next few days, it got worse. Jake started having long, private phone calls with his family. He'd leave the room when I approached, speaking in hushed tones when I asked about our plans for the money. He became evasive. "We need to be smart about this. Ava," he'd say, "my father knows people, financial advisors. We need to protect our windfall." 3 weeks after winning, on November 2nd, Jake sat me down in our living room. His parents were there, too, which should have been my first red flag. "Ava," Jake began, his voice unnaturally formal, "we need to talk about our situation." His father, Robert Caldwell, cleared his throat. "Daughter, this lottery win changes things. Jake's windfall needs proper protection." "Our windfall," I corrected him. "We're married. What's his is mine. What's mine is his." The room went silent. His mother, Patricia, exchanged a tense look with her husband. David smirked from his spot by the window. "Actually, Ava," Robert continued, "that's not exactly how this works. You see, lottery winnings are considered personal property in many cases, especially when—" Jake finally spoke up. "Ava, I think we should separate for a while. This money, it's mine. I want it. I picked the numbers." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What are you saying, Jake?" "I'm saying I want a divorce," he replied, not meeting my eyes, "and I want you to move out today." Robert Caldwell leaned forward. "The prenup you signed protects both parties. Ava, Jake's lottery win is his separate property. You're not entitled to any of it." I sat there stunned. 15 years of marriage, and they were throwing me away like garbage the moment real money entered the picture. "I see," I said quietly. "So this was all planned?" "Nothing was planned," Jake snapped. "But now that we have this opportunity, I'm not going to let anyone take advantage of me." "Take advantage." That's what he called our marriage. "Fine," I said, standing up. "I'll pack my things." Jake looked relieved. His family seemed pleased with how easily I was capitulating. They had no idea what they'd just done. I moved into an extended stay hotel on the outskirts of town that night, paying $115 per night. But instead of wallowing in self-pity, I did something they probably didn't expect. I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer. I called Arthur Simmons, a man I knew from my father's days working in local government. Now, a small-time family court attorney. His office was old and smelled of dusty paper, but his mind was sharp as a tack. His consultation fee was $600, but it was money well spent. "Miss Miller," Simmons said during our meeting the next morning, "tell me about this prenuptial agreement." I handed him the copy I'd kept in my home filing cabinet. Simmons read through it carefully, his expression growing more interested with each page. "This is fascinating," he said finally. "Your in-law's attorney was quite thorough, almost too thorough." "What do you mean?" I asked. Simmons pointed to a specific clause on page 3. "Right here, section 4. 2 states that any assets, prizes, or winnings acquired during the marriage shall be considered marital property subject to equitable distribution upon divorce. But they said lottery winnings are personal property." Simmons smiled. "In Texas, lottery tickets purchased with marital funds during a marriage are indeed marital property. And even if Jake used his own money, this prenup specifically overrides that protection, Miss Miller. Your in-laws just handed you the keys to the kingdom." I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. "So, I'm entitled to have, according to this document they made you sign. Potentially yes, but we'll need to be strategic. They're going to fight this hard. And they have resources. My retainer is $18,000. I used my credit card and borrowed against my 401k to pay it. Best investment I ever made." Over the next 2 weeks, Jake and his family made their intentions clear. They hired the most expensive divorce lawyer in Houston, a shark named Bradley Morrison, who specialized in protecting wealthy clients' assets. His hourly rate was $950. Morrison sent me threatening letters demanding I vacate any claim to the lottery winnings. He argued that since Jake picked the numbers and bought the ticket, it was his separate property regardless of the prenup. They underestimated me completely. They saw a working-class girl who'd roll over and accept whatever scraps they threw her. They were wrong. Simmons and I worked methodically through November and December. We documented everything when the ticket was purchased, what account the money came from, even the fact that Jake had been using our joint Wells Fargo checking account to buy lottery tickets for years. We had receipts from the corner store near our house, showing a pattern of marital spending, but the real breakthrough came when Simmons discovered something beautiful in Texas state law. Ava, he said during one of our strategy sessions in late December, Texas Family Code. Section 3.003 is very clear about lottery winnings acquired during marriage. Unless there's a specific agreement stating otherwise, they're marital assets. But didn't the prenup exclude them? Simmons grinned. That's the beautiful irony. The prenup your in-laws forced you to sign actually strengthens your claim. They specifically included language about any prizes or winnings being marital property. They were so worried about protecting their existing wealth, they accidentally gave away rights to future windfalls. Meanwhile, Jake was living it up. He bought a new Porsche 911 Targa for $125,000 in November, designer clothes, and put a deposit on a waterfront condo in Galveston for $800,000. His social media was full of photos from expensive restaurants and luxury shopping trips to the Galleria Mall. He was spending our money like it was going out of style, and social media was documenting everything. The divorce proceedings began in earnest in January 2025. Morrison, Jake's attorney, came out swinging. He filed motions to dismiss my claims, arguing that I was a gold digger trying to exploit a legal loophole. During our first court appearance at the Harris County Courthouse on January 15th, Morrison was cocky. He strutted around in his $2,000 Armani suit, making snide comments about opportunistic spouses to anyone who'd listen. Your Honor, Morrison argued, Miss Miller is attempting to claim half of winnings that her estranged husband earned through his own luck and intuition. The lottery ticket was purchased with Mr. Caldwell's personal funds using numbers he selected based on his family's significant dates. This is clearly separate property. Judge Patricia Henderson listened patiently. She was known for being thorough and fair, with 18 years on the bench in family court. Simmons stood up for our response. Your Honor, Texas law is clear on this matter, but more importantly, the prenuptial agreement that Mr. Morrison's clients insisted upon specifically states that any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage are marital property. Morrison scoffed. That clause was intended to cover things like small casino winnings or raffle prizes, not a $12 million lottery jackpot. The document says any prizes or winnings, Your Honor, Simmons replied calmly. It doesn't specify an amount limit. Judge Henderson requested copies of all documents. The hearing was adjourned for 2 weeks to allow her time to review everything. Jake was furious. I heard through mutual friends that he'd been screaming at his parents, blaming them for the prenup language. The Caldwell family was starting to panic. They tried to settle out of court in early February. Robert Caldwell called me directly on my cell phone, something he'd never done in 15 years of marriage. Ava, let's be reasonable here, he said. We'll offer you $1.5 million to walk away clean. That's more money than you've ever seen. I'll think about it, I replied, though I'd already made up my mind. 2 days later, Jake himself showed up at my extended stay motel room. He looked different, tired, stressed. The constant partying was taking its toll. Ava, please, he begged. We can work this out. I was scared. Okay, the money. It overwhelmed me. My family got in my head. Scared of what? Jake, sharing our good fortune. I'll give you $3.5 million, he said desperately. $3.5 million, Ava. We can both start fresh. I looked at my husband of 15 years, this man I'd once loved completely, and felt nothing but pity. It was never about the money, Jake, I said. It was about respect, and he left crying. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The discovery phase in February and March revealed just how badly they'd miscalculated. Simmons subpoenaed all of Jake's financial records, showing he'd been using our joint Wells Fargo account to buy lottery tickets for years. We had documentation going back to 2019, proving it was a pattern of marital spending. More damaging was what Morrison had advised Jake to do with the money. Instead of keeping it separate, he'd been spending it freely, mixing it with other marital funds. In legal terms, he'd commingled the asset, which further strengthened our claim. But the real nail in the coffin came when Simmons discovered Morrison had made a critical error. in his haste to file preliminary motions in November. He'd actually acknowledged in court documents that the lottery ticket was purchased during the marriage with marital funds. He just destroyed his own case, Simmons told me, barely containing his glee. Morrison's so used to bullying people into settlements, he got sloppy. The final hearing was scheduled for April 18th, 2025. As the date approached, the Caldwell family's desperation became obvious. They hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. They found nothing. I'd lived a clean life. They tried to claim I'd been emotionally abusive, hoping to reduce my settlement. Jake gave a deposition claiming I'd been controlling and manipulative. The problem was they had no evidence, no police reports, no medical records, no witnesses. It was pure fabrication. Simmons demolished their claims with phone records showing I had been the one making all the major financial decisions during our marriage. Bank statements proved I'd never controlled his access to money. His own social media posts showed him living freely and happily throughout our marriage. 3 days before the hearing, Morrison made one final settlement offer, $4.5 million. It's a good offer, Ava, Simmons advised. Taking this to trial is always a risk, even with our strong case. I shook my head. This isn't about maximizing money. Arthur, it's about justice. The night before court, I couldn't sleep in my motel room. I kept thinking about how this all started with a prenup designed to keep me from their precious family money. The irony was beautiful. Their own greed and paranoia had become the weapon that would defeat them. The Caldwell family had spent their whole lives looking down on people like me, working-class folks who earned their money through sweat and honest labor. They thought money made them better, smarter, more deserving. The next day, they'd learn otherwise. April 18th arrived. Gray and humid. Typical Houston spring weather. I wore my best suit, a navy blue one I'd bought for our wedding 15 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Harris County courthouse was packed. Word had gotten out about the case, and local news crews were stationed outside. Architect fights for lottery millions had become a human interest story. Jake sat with his family on one side of the courtroom, looking pale and nervous. Morrison whispered urgently in his ear, probably preparing him for what was coming. Judge Henderson took her seat at exactly 9:00 a.m. We're here for the matter of Miller versus Caldwell. Case number 2025-00000345. Mr. Morrison, you may present your opening argument. Morrison stood confidently, but I noticed his hands shaking slightly. Your Honor, this case is about a vindictive woman attempting to steal money she had no part in earning. Miss. Miller selected those lottery numbers, but the ticket was purchased by Mr. Caldwell with funds from his personal account, and he won that prize through his own actions. Simmons remained seated, taking notes on his yellow legal pad. He looked completely relaxed. Morrison continued for 20 minutes, arguing that lottery winnings were personal property, that the prenup didn't apply to unforeseeable windfalls, and that I was essentially a gold digger. When he finished, Judge Henderson turned to Simmons. Mr. Simmons, your opening statement. Simmons stood slowly. Your Honor, this case is remarkably simple. We have a prenuptial agreement signed by both parties in December 2010 that explicitly states any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage are marital property. We have Texas state law that supports this position, and we have documentation proving the lottery ticket was purchased with marital funds during the marriage. He paused, looking directly at Morrison. The defendants are asking this court to ignore their own contract because they don't like the outcome. The evidence phase was devastating for Jake's side. Simmons presented bank records showing years of lottery ticket purchases from our joint Wells Fargo account. He showed how Jake had commingled the lottery winnings with other marital assets. He even had the receipt from the corner store where he bought the winning ticket on October 8th, 2024 paid for with our joint debit card. Morrison's cross-examination was weak. He tried to argue that Jake had intended to keep the winnings separate, but intention doesn't matter when you've already mixed the money. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Simmons called Morrison's legal strategy into question by reading directly from his own court filings. Mr. Morrison, in your preliminary motion dated November 18th, 2024, you stated, and I quote, "The lottery ticket in question was purchased during the marriage with funds from the marital estate." Do you remember writing that? Morrison's face went white. That was a misstatement. A misstatement that you signed and filed with this court under penalty of perjury. Yes. Judge Henderson leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, are you telling this court you filed false documents? No, Your Honor, I misspoke in the document. I meant to say, Simmons interrupted. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison's own filings support our position. He's acknowledged that marital funds were used to purchase the winning ticket. The Caldwell family looked sick. Robert was sweating through his expensive suit. Patricia kept shaking her head in disbelief. Jake took the stand to testify on his own behalf. Morrison had coached him, but he was clearly rattled. Mr. Caldwell. Simmons began his cross-examination. You've testified that you always intended to keep any lottery winnings as separate property. Is that correct? Yes. Then why did you deposit the entire $7.2 million into your personal checking account at Bank of America, which you've been using to pay marital expenses? Jake stammered. I needed somewhere to put it. You have a separate account at SunTrust Bank, correct? An account your wife has never accessed? Yes, but an account with over $63,000 in it, correct? Yes. So, you had somewhere to keep the money separate, but you chose not to. Instead, you mixed it with marital funds and began spending it freely. Correct? Jake looked at Morrison desperately, but he couldn't help him. I guess so. Simmons pulled out his Porsche purchase agreement. You bought this car on November 15th, 2024, 5 days after depositing the lottery winnings. Correct. Yes. For $125,000. Yes. Using lottery money. Yes. Did you consult with your wife about this major purchase? We were separated. Mr. Caldwell, you didn't file for divorce until November 20th, 2024. You were still legally married when you bought this car. So, I'll ask again. Did you discuss this purchase with your wife? No. Judge Henderson recessed for lunch at 12:30 p.m. in the hallway. Robert Caldwell approached me one final time. Ava, this is madness. We'll appeal whatever decision she makes. This could drag on for years. That's your choice, Robert, I said. But I've got time and a good lawyer. The afternoon session was brief. Judge Henderson had made her decision. I've reviewed all evidence and applicable law. She began at 2:15 p.m. The prenuptial agreement signed in December 2010 is clear and unambiguous. Section 4.2 explicitly states that any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage are marital property. Texas Family Code. Section 3.003 supports this interpretation. Furthermore, the defendant's actions in commingling the lottery winnings with marital assets demonstrates his own recognition that these funds were not separate property. Jake started crying. His mother grabbed his hand. Therefore, I'm awarding Miss Miller 50% of the net lottery winnings totaling $4.05 million. Mr. Caldwell, you have 60 days to liquidate assets if necessary to meet this obligation. The gavel came down with a satisfying thud. At 2:22 p.m., outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. I ignored them all except one from a local news channel. Miss Miller, how does it feel to win? I thought about that for a moment. Justice always feels good. 2 months later, in June 2025, I used part of my settlement to buy a small architectural firm from a retiring architect. Today, Miller Design and Build employs 38 people and specializes in affordable housing throughout the Houston area. Jake had to sell his Porsche, return the deposit on his Galveston condo, and liquidate most of his expensive purchases to pay me. Last I heard, he was working for his father's real estate office, earning a modest salary. The Caldwell family never spoke to me again, which was fine by me. They'd shown their true colors when they thought they could throw me away like garbage. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just letting people face the consequences of their own greed and stupidity. They created the weapon that destroyed them. I just had the dignity to use it. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, Please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.